Tucker Carlson is a lunatic. And for those of you who think you know him, you do not. He's a false prophet. And by prophet, I mean P-R-O-F-I-T. He's one thing today, he was one thing yesterday, and he was something else before that. I've been a constitutional conservative, a Reagan conservative, my entire adult life. Nothing neocon about me, but there's a lot that's neocon about Tucker Carlson. If we're going to use the phrase, then let's use it right. But before I do, he wrote a really incoherent screed because he's desperate, he's upset. He says, Mark Levin was at the White House today lobbying for war with Iran. Donald Trump and I are friends. Good friends. I try not to bother him. I don't ask to come to the White House. I don't ask to go to Mar-a-Lago. If I'm there, it's because he asked me. And he asked me. Now, I know who was in that discussion with us, and I'm not going to violate any confidentialities. There's nothing secret about my views about anything. Hell, I'm here 5 days a week, 3 hours a day. I'm on Blaze. I'm on TV. My views are well known to millions and millions of people, even this reprobate, Carlson. But I think we'll call him now, what Rush used to call him, of course, Chatsworth Osborne Jr., because he looks like a kook, a nerd. Used to have the bow tie. Chatsworth. I didn't meet the president to lobby for war with Iran. But I know who was in there. And I know who leaked this to their boy, Carlson. And I'm not going to forget it. And at the proper time, that person will be confronted by me. Not physically, of course not. It was either that person or a person on his staff. And there's been a hell of a lot of leaking against the president, against his policies, by this shadow government within a government, the isolationists, the fifth columnists, who are trying to usurp his presidency and force policies on him that he himself doesn't agree with. Chatsworth, to be clear, Levin has no plans to fight in this or in any other war. So I'm not allowed to have an opinion about a possible war or foreign policy or anything else. Now think about how moronic that is. Just think about it for 2 seconds. So if you're not personally involved in an event that affects the whole country, you have no say. Tucker Carlson never shuts his big fat mouth, and he can't stop talking about this stuff. And so if Iran gets a nuclear weapon and threatens us and so forth and so on, is he going to war? No. So shut the hell up, Chatsworth. But let me go on. He says he's demanding that American troops do it. Mr. Producer, have I ever demanded that American troops do it, whatever that means? Not once. So he just lies. We need to stop Iran from building nuclear weapons. He and like-minded ideologues in Washington are now arguing. That's been the position of the President of the United States for 10 years. That's the position of Donald Trump. That's been the position of MAGA for 10 years. And by the way, Rasmussen has a poll out right now, the last couple of days. 84%. 84% does not want Iran to get nuclear weapons. So Tucker's in the 16%, and you have to ask yourselves, why is Tucker a special pleader for Iran? Why is Tucker a special pleader for Qatar? Why is Tucker a special pleader for Putin? Why isn't he a special pleader for the United States? Stop hiding behind our military. Stop hiding behind our people. Forget about the establishment and all the rest. Who is this guy? He says, if this sounds familiar, it's because the same people have been making the same claim since at least the 1990s. It's a lie. In fact, There's zero credible intelligence that suggests Iran is anywhere near building a bomb or has plans to. Is he illiterate? So let me get this straight. The IAEA, the UN, which hates America, hates Israel, they're lying. The Austrian intelligence, they're lying. The other European intelligence agencies, they're lying. And, I guess, our own CIA, our own Trump appointees are lying. Everybody's lying. But Tucker knows, because Tucker obviously has inside information. He must be getting it from his friends, the Qataris, the Iranians, Putin. I don't know where he's getting it from. 350-foot steel cement bunker underground. That's a giveaway. The Iranians themselves have confessed pretty much to what they're doing because they refuse to give it up. But Tucker wants you to believe it's all a mirage. And so the whole country's future, the future of civilization, the future of your family depends on Tucker. Chatsworth. He goes on, anyone who claims otherwise is ignorant or dishonest. If the U.S. government knew Iran was weeks from possessing a nuclear weapon, we'd be at war already. Here's a guy lobbying against war on any circumstances. And by war, he means even limited tactical hits. Not a full-out war, but he thinks a full-out war is needed. Nobody's talking about that except him and his Luddite friends. Nobody's talking about a full-scale war like Iraq. Is somebody sending 250,000 troops? Nobody. The Israelis are saying, let us at them. We'll take care of it. No. Then he goes on. He says, Iran knows this, and he would know what Iran knows, I guess, which is why they aren't building one. So Iran's not building nukes. Okay, case closed. Tucker says Iran's not building nukes. Let's pull back. Forget about what our intelligence agency says, the Europeans, the UN, the IAEA. Forget about what the Iranians have already confessed to. Tucker knows. Tucker knows. And maybe a couple of his comedian buddies know. What an a-hole, seriously. Iran knows it's unwise to give up its weapons program entirely. Okay, wait a minute. He says they're not building a nuclear weapon, and Iran also knows it's unwise to give up its weapons program entirely. Mr. Producer, is that even coherent? Tucker, are you an idiot? Have you had a recent head injury? He goes on, Muammar Gaddafi tried that and wound up sodomized with a bayonet. As soon as Gaddafi disarmed, NATO killed him. First of all, it was years later. Secondly, NATO didn't kill him. His people killed him, you moron. With a bayonet up the you-know-what. Iran's leaders saw that happen. They learned the obvious lesson. Well, what is the obvious lesson? Don't give up your nuclear warheads? Don't give up your nuclear program? The moron's making my argument. But let's go on. So why is Mark Levin once again hyperventilating about weapons of mass destruction? To distract you from the real goal, which is regime change. Young Americans heading back to the Middle East to topple yet another government. Have I ever said regime change, Mr. Producer? See, he has to create these false arguments because he's a lunatic. I never said there should be regime change. I certainly never said we ought to be sending American troops like Iraq. What does this have to do with Iraq? Iraq was a full-out war. It was about imposing a democracy on Iraq. Nobody is saying a full-out war impose a democracy. They're saying, hey, these bastards are building nukes. We better take them out. Is this too confusing for Chatsworth to understand? Apparently it is. I thought he went to prep school, Mr. Perdue. Didn't he go to prep school? What was he doing at prep school? We don't want to know. Virtually no one will say this out loud. Yeah, because you're an idiot. America's record of overthrowing foreign governments is so embarrassingly counterproductive that regime change, so now he's talking to himself, that regime change has become a synonym for disaster. I didn't call for regime change. Officially, no one supports it. Ah, so you don't call for it. So he says you must support it secretly in your own mind. Psycho. So instead of telling the truth about their motives, they manufacture hysteria. The truth about my motives is to prevent them from having a nuclear bomb. What are you talking about? Country like Iran could never have the bomb. They'll nuke Los Angeles. We have to act now. He puts in quotes with an exclamation. He's sarcastic about nuclear war. Here's a guy that keeps saying, in response to anything that goes on, we're going to start World War III. We're going to have a nuclear war. So when you actually identify a country that's trying to get a nuclear weapon, that says it hates America, that it wants to take us out, then he says, oh, you're being hysterical. This guy's got more personalities than Sybil. They don't really mean this, there again, and you can tell they don't by what they omit. Ooh, do tell. Are you a palm reader? At least two of Iran's neighbors, both Islamic nations, already have nuclear weapons. Now, I have tried to figure out the two Islamic neighbors of Iran. Now, if he's talking about Pakistan, Pakistan has a nuclear weapon. I wish they didn't. We actually have a military alliance with Pakistan, ladies and gentlemen. And Pakistan and its people, at the head of their government, they're not screaming death to America every day. Chadbourne, do you see the distinction? It's an ally, even though it's an uneasy ally. We have a military alliance with them, and they're not threatening the United States. Iran hates us, threatens to blow us off the face of the earth, and they want a nuclear weapon. See the distinction? It's not that they're Muslims. It's that you've got Islamist terrorists running one regime and not the other. I can draw a picture for you if you like. He says, how come? Because it's not the weapons he hates. It's the ideology of the Iranian government, which is why he's lobbying to overthrow it. Number one, yes, I do hate the ideology of the Iranian government, which is Islamist Nazi, to slaughter people who are in the way, like the West. Do you not hear what they say? Is your head too far up? You know whose butt coming out his right nostril. You hear what they say? Yeah, I have a problem with their ideology, which talks about wiping America off the face of the earth. Oh, and the Jews. Is that okay, Tucker, if I mention that? I know. The Jews are trying to get us in a way. We got that. It goes without saying that there are very few Trump voters who'd support a regime change war in Iran. There's very few any voters who called for regime change in Iran. Try to stay focused. It doesn't serve his purposes. He's a false prophet. Donald Trump has argued loudly against reckless lunacy like this. I'm supporting the Trump policy, moron. You are not. You are supporting the Iranian policy. That's the difference. Trump ran for president as a peace candidate, making sure Iran does not get nuclear weapons, which Trump has said for a decade, makes him the peace candidate. You see, I'm for peace. You're the warmonger. That's what made him different from conventional Republicans. He's not different from conventional Republicans on this issue. Republicans support him by significant numbers to make sure Iran does not get a bomb. It would end his presidency. That may explain why so many of Trump's enemies are advocating for it. Now, there's the paranoia, Mr. Producer. Chatsworth Osborne Jr., a.k.a. Tucker Carlson. He's been called famously now online Tucker Carlson, because of that slobbering interview he did all over the inbred who runs Qatar. He loves the dictators. Putin thought the interview was so pathetic, he humiliated Chatsworth afterwards, saying, I thought he was going to ask me some tough questions. No, he enjoyed the subway system in Moscow. That's how far gone this guy is. He's taking you for a ride, America. The vast majority of America knows that, but there's some of you who worship this demigod, and you ought not to. He's taking you for a ride. He goes on, and then there's the question of the war itself. Iran may not have nukes, so keep in mind, Iran doesn't have anything we have to worry about, so we ought not hit Iran. But It has fearsome arsenal of ballistic missiles, many of which are aimed at U.S. military installations in the Gulf, as well as our allies and a critical energy infrastructure. The first week of a war with Iran could easily kill thousands of Americans. No, it couldn't. Unfortunately, it could kill thousands of Israelis because they have Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and major cities. But it's not going to kill thousands of Americans. It could collapse our economy. Yeah, that's right. We're relying on Iran for our economy. As surging oil prices trigger unimaginable inflation. It's unimaginable. Consider $30 a gallon gasoline. Yeah, think about it. It won't happen. We don't get our gasoline and oil from Iran. We're supposed to have policies in place where they can't even sell any of it on the open market, right? So how would it affect us? Just saying. But the second week of the war could be even worse, he says. Iran isn't Iraq or Libya or even North Korea. While it's often described as a rogue state, Iran has powerful allies. It's now part of a global bloc called BRICS. A moron. BRICS is an economic group. It's not a military group. It includes Brazil and India and others. Ladies and gentlemen, do you think Brazil and India are going to go to war so Iran can have nukes against the United States of America and Israel? Do you? Well, apparently, Chatsworth does. Hey, and it's now part of a global bloc called BRICS. Again, an economic alliance which represents the majority of the world's landmass, population, economy, and military power. Iran has extensive military ties with Russia. It sells the overwhelming majority of its oil exports to China. See? He gives with one hand, he takes with the other. So Iran is a threat. Is Iran a threat or not a threat, Chatsworth? Do you know if it's a threat or not a threat? What does your own intelligence tell you, since you don't really rely on anybody else's intelligence, particularly the United States intelligence or anybody else's? It sells the overwhelming majority of its oil to China. And Iran isn't alone. An attack on Iran could very easily become a world war. We'd lose. You know, that's interesting. In the 1960s, Bill Buckley wrote a piece. You remember Bill Buckley? I believe one of Chatsworth's kids is named after Buckley, or at least his brother is. One of them is. One of them is named Buckley. I assume it's Bill Buckley. Are we supposed to hate Bill Buckley now? So old school, you know. So was Aristotle, Cicero. You understand. Founders. So old school. Will Formosa liberate the United States from rumbles left and right? An essay collection published in 1963 by Bill Buckley. Bill Buckley, not Buckley Carlson. And so we come to liberal proposition 3, writes Buckley. All the roads that lead to the recovery of freedom or to the diminution of communist power, in this case Islamist power, are closed to us because to follow them would mean a risk of nuclear war. There is the clinching argument in all liberal rhetoric by which they paralyze all purposeful action everywhere in the world that aims at the improvement of the position of the free world. Here's the ultimate mischief of liberalism it's capable of performing. And in this, in the respect to liberalism, most clearly does the work of the communists, or in this case, the Islamists, the object of whose propaganda for years has been discernible, namely, to terrorize the West into inactivity by threats of nuclear war, or in case of Chatsworth's point, nuclear war and World War III. Because you see, all these Arab countries that want Iran destroyed, they may say one thing publicly, but privately, they've said us something else. They want Iran destroyed because Iran tried to overthrow Kuwait. They want to overthrow Saudi Arabia. Egypt can't stand them. They've tried to overthrow Jordan because they know Iran wants to control the region. Chatsworth knows it too. Which one of those Arab countries would join in with Iran to attack the United States and Israel? Can you name one, Mr. Producer? I mean, in April, the Egyptians, the Jordanians, they allowed the United States, they even allowed the Israelis to fire over their own airspace. The Egyptians were supportive too. Who helped Iran in April? Nobody. April of last year. But don't worry. Don't worry. Chatsworth, Tucker Carlson, has it all figured out like a good lib. What is he? To me, he sounds like Bernie Sanders. Am I missing something? He sounds like Bernie Sanders when it comes to national security. He just does. Look, it goes on. It's just so stupid. That's so stupid. Over at National Review, a friend of ours, Philip Klein, to be dismissed, of course, because he's Jewish. He says Carlson offers two contrasting portraits of Iran. On one hand, he describes Iran as a nation that poses no threat and argues that there's no reason to fear it gaining nuclear weapons. On the other, he warns of its fearsome, arsenal of ballistic missiles. We'd kill thousands of American troops in a week, and then ultimately we'd lose a war against the country. Carlson is everything backwards. Right now, Iran is vulnerable. It fired hundreds of ballistic missiles and drones at Israel on two separate occasions, but thanks to Israeli, got that, Tucker? Israeli, Jews, and U.S. missile defense systems, and to help the regional partners, there was barely any damage. Last October, Israel launched retaliatory strikes against Iran, crippling its missile production, damaged much of its anti-aircraft capability without losing a single aircraft. And what happened to the price of fuel? It went down. So there's now a window to destroy Iran's nuclear program, or at least to set a severe setback. But Chatsworth says no. This isn't the first time Carlson has issued paranoid warnings about Iranian retaliation. After President Trump successfully ordered the killing of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps commander Qasem Soleimani. I remember this. Carlson claimed the attack had put the U.S. on the brink of war, quote unquote. At the time, he also invoked the Iraq example, stating of those who favored Trump's action, these are the same people who lied about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction way back in 2002. And doing that got us into an utterly pointless war that dramatically weakened our country. The people pushing conflict with Iran are the same people who did it then. Actually, Chatsworth, you were one of them. Again, nobody other than Carlson and his allies are arguing the U.S. is going to use the Iraq war model for military action against Iran. As things currently stand, Iran is marching toward a nuclear weapon, and the supreme leader has rejected President Trump's demand that it abandon uranium enrichment. Carlson's position, in effect, is that Trump should cave to the demands of Iran on enrichment. He likes to portray himself as an opponent of the elites, but the idea of negotiating with Iran rather than striking its nuclear program militarily is as close as you can get to a Washington elite establishment consensus. In fact, his idea that the only alternative is to signing a bad deal with Iran is World War III is a false choice right out of the playbook of Barack Obama and John Kerry. So which is it? Is Chatsworth, Tucker Carlson, Bernie Sanders, or Barack Obama, or John Kerry? You pick. And you suckers that follow this guy, trust me, you're going to regret it one day. He's such a moron. How much time do I have, Rich? All right, let's get to it. It wasn't that long ago when Chatsworth was writing for the Weekly Standard. The Weekly Standard marketed itself as a neoconservative magazine. I never worked for a neoconservative magazine. I was never a neoconservative, using their nomenclature. But Chatsworth was. He was at the end of his 5 years there, 5 years, working under Bill Kristol. He was a senior editor at the neoconservative Weekly Standard. And Kristol's father was called the godfather of the neoconservative movement, a very good man, by the way, unlike his son, Irving Kristol, founding father. And so there you have Irving, Bill, and Chatsworth Tucker. He chose to work in a magazine that promoted a neoconservative perspective. But not only that, Chatsworth, he went on C-SPAN at the time, talking about Pat Buchanan, trashing him basically as an anti-Semite. And what's interesting about what Chatsworth has to say is, Chatsworth's talking about himself today. You take a listen. Go.
I mean, this is part of the sad thing about Pat Buchanan, as far as I'm concerned. And just to restate, I mean, Pat does raise issues that I think are important. I mean, I think that, the sovereignty of the American military, et cetera. I mean, these are not just crank issues. But unfortunately, Pat Buchanan raises them in a way that I think is discredited. And when attacked, he can always fall back on the line, well, the tiny cabal that controls American politics doesn't like me because I speak truth to power. This is actually, incidentally, almost verbatim what he said the other day. I offend the plutocracy, that I'm a wanted man by the inside the Beltway people, and in every sense cast himself as a victim who is sort of a Karen Silkwood of politics, someone who's so truthful that he's being hunted down by the conspiracy that runs Washington. I mean, it's all a bit much. Maybe Pat Buchanan just says things that are kind of kooky, and that's why he's being criticized. It's perfectly valid to question America's relationship with Israel. Israel has a lobby. It's perfectly fair, as far as I'm concerned, to beat up on Israel's lobby. But I don't think that's the reason that Buchanan is being labeled an anti-Semite. It's this kind of, as I've said, this relentless bringing up topics related to Judaism. I mean, famously, Pat, always beats up on Goldman Sachs, but never Morgan Stanley. I mean, it's really hard to. There is no point at which Pat Buchanan has held a press conference and said, I really don't like the Jews. I think they're a sinister force in America. But I think, and it took me years to come to this position. I mean, I'm not throwing the term anti-Semite around. But you reach a point when you say, well, gee, here's a guy who has gone out of his way to defend Demyanyuk and other accused Nazi war criminals, who's constantly attacked Israel, who's attacked American Jews for supporting Israel unduly, who's implied that American Jews push America into wars in which non-Jews die. There really is, and again, I'm not hysterical on this subject, but I do believe that there is a pattern with Pat Buchanan of needling the Jews. Is that anti-Semitic? Yeah. I mean, after a while, you conclude it is, in some sense, anti-Semitic. I mean, Pat Buchanan obviously has a lot of personal and affectionate relationships with people who are Jewish. So on a personal level, perhaps he's not. But on a different, maybe thematic level, I think he probably is. I think that people should be allowed to have differing views on immigration. I think people should be allowed to point out the fact that there is an Israeli lobby, and yes, it's powerful, and debate the merits of that, I guess. I don't think there's, strictly speaking, anything wrong with that. But again, I think Pat Buchanan is part of the reason it's so hard to have that conversation, because he discredits it by his presence, because he gives people who watch him carefully the sense that he has another agenda that has to do with personal dislike, and that he believes in conspiracies, and that he believes that the Jews are this sinister, secretly organized force trying to affect American politics. And those aren't discussions I think normal people, sober people, should be having, because I think they're ludicrous.
By the way, he sounds like a preppy boy, doesn't he? He didn't go to my high school, I can tell you that. But that said, doesn't it sound like he's pointing at himself about now? He does to me. That's just my opinion. What the hell happened to you, you jerk? What the hell happened to you? Did you bang your head or something? Because something is screwed up big time.